All right, let's dive in. A deep dive, that is.
Into some fascinating stuff, I hear.
Exactly. You've given us quite a collection of sources all about Norse and Danish folklore and mythology, and we're ready to unearth the most interesting bits for you.
Mythological treasure hunt.
Haha, yeah. You mentioned wanting to really get into the details, so we're going to take our time with this deep dive, really unpack each tale.
Excellent. Looking forward to it.
We'll be exploring everything from Danish ballads to those epic Norse sagas, and even some of those scholarly interpretations you've thrown in there.
It's a rich mix.
Absolutely. It's like peeking into the Viking world, isn't it? Their beliefs, their understanding of, well, everything.
Totally agree. A blend of history, myth, and, those core cultural values.
Okay, so let's start with this first source you've given us. It's the Danish ballad Hevners Verdet. Did I pronounce that right?
You got it, yeah. It means the sword of vengeance.
Ah, that's ominous. And it's a story of forbidden love, right?
Right from the start, high stakes, passionate emotions, against this backdrop of, well, a blood feud.
Two kingdoms at odds.
Exactly. We meet King Havor of Norway, completely smitten with Princess Signold of Denmark.
But they're families, like sworn enemies.
Makes their love, well, impossible.
Talk about star-crossed lovers. But, Havor doesn't just give up. He comes up with this crazy plan, disguises himself as a woman to infiltrate the Danish court and win Signhild's heart.
Now that is daring. Speaks volumes about how far people would go for love,
For sure, for sure. But also, it kind of hints at those social boundaries of the time, right? He had to disguise himself as a woman to even get close.
Absolutely. His disguise, it lets him cross those boundaries. Enter spaces typically forbidden to men. It's clever how the ballad uses that.
To explore those deeper themes.
Like identity, societal expectations.
It makes you wonder, how convincing his disguise must have been, right? To fool everyone, even Signhild.
Exactly. And the risks he's taking, it adds so much to his character.
It's more than infatuation. It's a powerful connection that drives him, right?
Absolutely.
So he wins Signhild over. But it doesn't last. There's this betrayal. Signhild's maid steals Havor's armor and sword and exposes him.
Oh, Signhild's maid. Torn between loyalties.
Duty versus love, right?
Yeah. And she ultimately chooses duty with devastating consequences.
Devastating is an understatement. Havor is captured, executed, and Signhild, faced with a life without him, she chooses death, too. Sets fire to her bower.
Powerful ending. Underlines the intensity of their love, the destructive nature of, well, revenge.
It definitely doesn't shy away from showing us the cost of those feuds and how actions driven by blind loyalty, well, they could be devastating.
Powerful lesson about the dangers of letting hatred, rule our choices.
Okay, so we've gone from love and betrayal to, well, the sword of vengeance. Quite a start to our deep dive. But this next source you've given me, it takes us on a different journey. The story of Ketill Hang.
Ah, Ketill. Now, he starts off as this seemingly unremarkable farmer's son, right?
Ridiculed for being lazy, lacking ambition.
But appearances can be deceiving, right?
His poor father, though, always nagging at him, until Ketill starts to show, well, some pretty surprising feats of strength.
One of the first hints is that scene with the neighbor, right? Mocking Ketill and his father. And what does Ketill do? Throws a fish with such force it kills the neighbor.
Okay, not your average fish toss. And then there's that other scene. His father can barely budge this boat, and Ketill just casually shoves it into the water.
These little actions, they're clues. They tell us there's more to Ketill than meets the eye, hidden strength.
Waiting to be unleashed. And unleashed it is. He heads north, encounters, well, pretty much every mythical creature you can imagine.
Giants, right? A shape-shifting whale woman, even the king of the Laplanders.
Classic hero stuff. Testing his courage, pushing him to his limits. What I find fascinating is he finds these magical weapons along the way. Powerful arrows, a magical sword.
It's like a recurring theme, isn't it, in these sagas?
It feels like those magical weapons, they represent something, right? Maybe the hero's growth, empowerment.
Definitely. Enabling him to face greater challenges. It's like a reminder that the supernatural and the human world, they're intertwined. These heroes, they rely on both their own skills and, well, a little help from magic.
I noticed that Ketill's relationships evolve a lot, too. Like with his father. Starts off strained, but then becomes, well, supportive, even proud.
And then there's Ragnhild, the giantess. That relationship is, well, it's complex.
Bittersweet. Like it's highlighting that crash between the human and supernatural worlds.
Right. Even with mythical beings, those human emotions, they're central. Love, loss, it's all there.
Okay, so I've got tragic love, a hero's journey. But what about the gods themselves?
Ah, yes. The Norse pantheon. Powerful deities with, shall we say, complex personalities.
Right. For this deep dive, you said you want to focus on the major players. Odin, Thor, and Loki.
I find them fascinating. And their stories, oh, they're filled with adventure, intrigue, and often a bit of chaos.
You specifically mentioned Thor's journey to Utgard Loki's hall.
Such an interesting story.
Thor, the god of strength. But he gets outsmarted by giants.
It challenges our expectations, makes us think beyond brute force.
So tell me more about what happens in Utgard Loki's hall. What kind of challenges does Thor face?
Well, they seem simple at first, like drinking from a horn or wrestling with an old woman.
Sounds easy enough.
But there's trickery, magic woven into every tack.
So Thor can't just rely on his strength to win.
Exactly. It's a lesson in humility, a reminder that even the strongest can be deceived.
I like that. So was it a loss for Thor, or it's not so clear-cut, is it?
That's what makes it so compelling. Makes us question the nature of victory and defeat.
It's like, did Thor lose, or did he learn something?
The stories often blur the lines like that, leaving us to ponder, to find our own interpretations.
Now that you mentioned blurred lines, that brings us to the death of Balder. Tragedy and a pivotal moment in Norse mythology.
Right. Dramatic irony, impending doom. It sets the stage for Ragnarok.
The end of the world as they knew it.
Balder, the god of light, beloved by all, immune to all harm thanks to his mother, Frigg.
But then he meets his end, all because of Loki.
And mistletoe, such an insignificant thing, right? But deadly in Loki's hands.
And to make it even more tragic, it's Balder's brother, Hoder, who delivers the fatal blow.
Unknowingly, yes. Tragic consequences, even with good intentions.
Loki's trickery feels like it's always stirring up chaos. But with Balder's death, it's different, isn't it? Like a shift, a turning point, a sign that the balance is off.
Absolutely. It's the beginning of the end, sets in motion the events that lead to Ragnarok.
So, a lot to unpack with Ragnarok then, the end of the world according to Norse mythology. But I think we need to take a pause here, catch our breath. When we come back, we'll explore Ragnarok in detail and see what it reveals about how the Norse understood the cycles of creation and destruction.
Ragnarok, the end of the world as the Norse knew it. Cataclysmic, yeah. But it's not just an ending, is it?
You're right, it's not. It's this massive, all-consuming battle, but there's this sense of, like, renewal, a new world rising from the ashes. But I'm curious, how did the Norse people actually view this event? Was it something they feared, or?
It's fascinating to consider, right? Imagine knowing that even the gods you worship, they're not eternal. They face destruction too.
It's a bit of a mind bender.
Terrifying and, in a way, comforting.
Comforting. How so?
Well, think about it. It speaks to the cyclical nature of, well, everything. Endings are also beginnings. Ragnarok, it wasn't just negative. It was a stage in a continuous cycle, creation and destruction.
So this cyclical worldview, it kind of helped them cope, maybe.
Likely, yeah, to come to terms with their own mortality and find meaning. In a world where chaos and change, they were constant.
So it's not just about the world ending. It's about transformation.
Rebirth, a new beginning.
Okay, so let's talk about what happens during Ragnarok, because those sources you gave me, they get pretty intense with the imagery.
Oh, absolutely. Think about the signs that foreshadow Ragnarok, the sun and moon swallowed by these monstrous wolves. Darkness descends. Fenrir, the giant wolf, breaks free. Chaos unleashed. And then there's Fimbulwinter, a 3-year winter. Brutal. Famine. Hardship.
It's like watching the world unravel, piece by piece. And then the final battle begins, Thor facing off against Jormungandr, the world's serpent.
Epic battle. Thor, with his raw strength, unwavering determination, he fights this colossal serpent, Jormungandr, whose venom, it's lethal, even to the gods.
I can't even imagine the scale of that fight.
Thor, wielding Mjolnir, his mighty hammer, he triumphs, but not without cost.
He dies.
He succumbs to the serpent's poison. A hero's death.
A bittersweet victory for sure. And what about Odin? He's fated to face Fenrir, right?
Yes, a heartbreaking scene. Odin, wise and powerful leader of the gods, swallowed whole by Fenrir, chaos-consuming order.
So it's the end for Odin.
It is, but even in his demise, there's this sense that the old must give way to the new.
So it's not a happy ending, but it's not the end either.
Exactly. You mentioned rebirth, and there are hints of what comes after. Remember Balder, the god of light, whose death, well, it sparked the chain of events leading to Ragnarok.
Right, right.
He returns from the underworld after Ragnarok, along with Hoder, his brother, a new beginning, peace and harmony.
A promise of redemption, hope after devastation.
Exactly. Ragnarok, it's not a finality, it's a transition, a cleansing fire.
Okay, so we've talked about Ragnarok's symbolism, the bigger meaning, but what about from the human perspective? Knowing that this apocalyptic battle was coming, how did that affect the way they lived their lives?
Well, imagine that, knowing the end is inevitable.
Bleak.
But maybe it instilled a sense of urgency, purpose. Their actions, bravery, honor, It all mattered.
So instead of living in fear, it might have empowered them?
To face challenges head-on, knowing that even with inevitable destruction, their choices, they held weight.
It ties into that whole fate versus free will thing, right?
Exactly. The North, they believed in fate, preordained events, but they also believed in individual agency, choosing how to face your destiny.
It's a tricky balance, isn't it?
Complex, for sure. And that interplay, fate and free will, it's all over Norse mythology, reminds us that we may not control everything, but we can choose how we respond.
A message that resonates even today. Right, uncertainty, hardship, we all face it. But we have a choice in how we approach those situations.
These Norse tales, they offer a framework for understanding those dilemmas. Life is a journey filled with both good and bad. Our choices shape our narratives.
Okay, so we've explored the end of the world and what comes after. But we're not quite done with our deep dive yet. We still have one more saga to unpack. And this one delves into the world of Viking power struggles, ambition, and the complexities of legacy.
Ah, yes. The tale of Ragnar Lodbrok. It's a glimpse into Viking leadership, thirst for glory, and the consequences.
Sounds intense. So Ragnar Lodbrok, he's a legendary Viking figure, right? But beyond the legends, who was he? What made his story so significant?
Let's find out. He's one of those figures, right on the edge of history and myth. A Viking hero, king, warrior, raider, his exploits, oh, they've been passed down through generations.
So both in historical accounts and those more, shall we say, colorful sagas.
Exactly. And what strikes me is his ambition. Relentless. Not content with just ruling, he's always pushing boundaries, new conquests, almost like he needs to prove himself.
I noticed that too when I was reading through the sources. It's like this constant drive to achieve something more.
He's not just after wealth or power. He wants glory, recognition, a legacy, and that desire, it fuels him, drives his raids, his strategies. But it also, well, it contributes to his downfall.
His raid on England, that really highlights his ambition, doesn't it? Building these massive warships, bigger than anyone had ever seen.
And setting off to conquer England with just 2 ships, audacious, shows his confidence, his willingness to take risks.
He wasn't playing it safe. He wanted to make a statement.
Achieve the extraordinary.
But it comes at a cost, doesn't it? Because he ends up captured by King Ella of Northumbria.
Allah, he ignores the warnings, condemns Ragnar to death, a pit of snakes. Brutal.
What a way to go. A legendary warrior brought down like that. But the story doesn't end there, does it? His sons pick up where he left off.
Oh, they do. Driven by vengeance, they inherit their father's strength and his thirst for, well, payback.
They become key players, shaping events with their own ambitions, right?
They're a force to be reckoned with. Each son, unique skills, but all united by that shared purpose, to avenge their father.
One source specifically mentions Ivar the Boneless, the mastermind behind the revenge plot against King Aletta. He's quite a character, isn't he?
Ivar, oh, fascinating. Despite his physical limitations, he's cunning, strategic, a master manipulator.
And patient, willing to wait for the right moment to strike.
His cunning, it's on full display. And that story about how he gets land from Aletta tricks him, saying he only needs a small plot, enough to be covered by an oxhide.
Ah, the oxide trick. Classic Viking ingenuity.
Ivar, he cuts the hide into thin strips, extends it, encompasses a much larger area.
Sneaky. And on that land, he builds a fortress.
Strategically positioned to challenge Aloa's rule.
It's not just revenge, is it? It's a power play.
And it works. Ivar and his brothers, they attack. A devastating victory. Brutal. They take their revenge.
The Blood Eagle. Gruesome. A chilling reminder that actions have consequences. And that revenge, it can consume anyone.
Even the most honorable.
Ragnar's legacy, it continues to shape events even after his death. It's amazing how his sons are driven by his memory. And their actions, they change everything.
It speaks to the power of family, legacy, how past events, they ripple into the present.
The tale of Ragnar Lodbrok, it really is like this microcosm of the Viking world, isn't it? Ambition, violence, strategic brilliance, and this deep-seated belief in honor and kinship.
Exactly. It all comes together in this one saga.
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, from a ballad of forbidden love to a hero's journey to the realm of the gods, the end of their world, and now this very human story of ambition and revenge.
It's amazing how these tales, so different in many ways, they paint such a vivid picture of Norse and Danish culture, their beliefs, their values, fears, their understanding of the cosmos.
It's like looking through a window into another world, isn't it?
Exactly.
And for you listening, we hope this deep dive has given you a new understanding of these tales, uncovered some fascinating details, and shown how these seemingly simple stories, they actually grapple with some pretty complex themes. themes that still resonate with us today.
Absolutely. From those tragic consequences of blind loyalty we saw in The Sword of Vengeance to the cyclical nature of things in Ragnarok, these tales offer a glimpse into a world both familiar and utterly strange, inviting us to think about our own place in the grand scheme of things.
Thank you for joining us on this journey. Through Norse and Danish folklore and mythology, we hope you'll keep exploring these stories, discover even more for yourself.